Welcome to the Seeds of Wisdom series, brought to you by From a Loving Place with author Rachel Wolf. If you like deep, meaningful conversations, this is your place. So settle in and enjoy today's guest. Disclaimer: the Seeds of Wisdom digs into some deep subject matter. In order to plant a seed, we have to dig in the dirt. That's how we grow. If any of the subject matter feels like too much, it is important to seek your own mental health support. I did, and it's why I'm able to be here doing this today. Hello and welcome to episode 21. Today I'm so excited to have with me my special guest, Kim Colegrove, and we are going to be talking about her seed, which is so powerful after I just finished reading her book, which is Turning a Mess into a Message. And it just sings to my whole heart. So I'm going to let her introduce herself so that we can dive right into this really meaningful topic.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'm Kim Colegrove. I'm the author of Mindfulness for Warriors and the owner of Pause First Academy. And we offer in-person and online resilience and wellness training to first responders at Pause First Academy. So that's kind of my mini bio.
So she was gracious enough to send me a copy of her book, and I read it in one sitting.
Really?
Yes. Well, after I had started it for a few pages into it at a doctor's office and decided it wasn't the proper place. I wanted to give it full focus and my full attention and not worry about what people were thinking around me as I'm reading this, because it's so moving and touching.
Thank you.
You are the epitome of turning a mess into a message. And so let's start with what that means to you. What does that mean?
What that means to me is that instead of me allowing what was a devastating event in my life, I didn't want that to define me in that sad, heavy, tragic way that, those kind of incidents can. Of course, this wasn't conscious in the beginning. In the beginning, I was just trying to survive it. But what happened was something caused me to kind of step outside of my own grief and my own story and started thinking about other people who had done work similar to my husband. So he was a police officer for 8 years and then a federal agent, an investigator for the last 22 years of his career. So law enforcement for 30 years. And definitely those first 8 years in a patrol car, I feel like did a lot of damage to him mentally and emotionally, carried a lot of unresolved trauma around that. And so after he died by suicide, I just did the business for a while, like just did the things that had to be done. But then at some point, something kind of instigated me or inspired me to think about all the people who had worked that call. Somebody called 911. There was a dispatcher that answered the call that had to hear about that call. There were officers that were dispatched to the scene that had to work the scene. There was an officer that came to my front door that had to give me the death notification. So that was what started to transform me from someone suffering and grieving and kind of marinating and all of that to somebody who could take that energy, that grief, that energy, and kind of transform it and figure out how to help or what I could do for other people, because I started to make that connection with the people that were involved in that call that happened in my life. And I thought, oh my gosh, my husband has done so much of this. He was a crime scene investigator. He worked suicide calls. He knocked on people's doors to give death notifications. I mean, he had done all of this in his career. And so I'm really grateful that it took some time, but I'm really grateful that that occurred to me and that I got on that path, because I do think I kind of harnessed some of that negative energy, some of that grief and heaviness. I think I kind of harnessed it and then just poured it into what can I do to contribute and maybe prevent a few people from having to go through what my family just went through. Yeah.
Yeah. And, in the book, you talk about how something like this permeates. It's not just the person involved.
Yeah, the ripple effects.
Yeah, the ripple effect. And and it just hit me so hard because I was hospitalized at 17 for attempting suicide. And it wasn't until I saw a mother in there who had found her daughter in the closet. That was what woke me up. It wasn't the psychiatrist, it wasn't the therapist, it wasn't the other people. What woke me up and got me to never attempt it again was that mother. Was like seeing her blame herself for her daughter. When yeah, and it's because the ripple effects are so much bigger than anybody who is feeling suicidal thoughts can even imagine.
For sure.
Yeah.
When they're in that mental and emotional state, they're not rationalizing or reasoning. From my experience of talking to people now over the years who have attempted but were not successful, there's a common thread that is something like, I very much felt like everyone and everything would be better off without me in that moment.
Yes.
In that moment. And so, those of us who haven't experienced that, you really can't know what that feels like. So I've heard people use the word coward about people who attempted suicide or completed suicide. And I think, boy, that is, I don't think your grandma ever taught you to stand in someone else's shoes, because that's extremely judgmental and you're judging something you can't possibly understand. Yeah.
Yeah, because you think you're making everybody's life better. I mean, when I read the line in the book, it was the exact thought that had gone through my mind at that time, is that
Yeah.
I would make people's lives better if I wasn't here.
It's a really common thought.
Mm-hmm.
It's the reason why we need to we got to start placing more emphasis on the conversation around mental health and suicide specifically, because it's a word that people are afraid to utter.
Yes.
Because it's like, if you talk about it or if you say it, it's going to cause it, or it brings it about, or something like that. So we have to flip that script.
Yeah.
And talk about it. And that, I mean, I and the trainers that I work with, we do that. We don't want to trigger anybody or upset anybody, but not talking about it is killing people.
Yes.
Not talking about it is creating this silent suffering that's epidemic, especially across military and veterans and first responder professions. So yeah, it's a huge topic and a difficult one to talk about and to teach about and to write about, for sure. But because of the state of our society, it's something we have to face and talk about.
Well, and I love that you're doing it. I love that you found this voice within you beckoning you to this, to this cause, because, you know, the PTSD and the nervous systems, there's ways that can help calm that you have, you've shared in the book, you've shared through stories of other first responders that work. They work.
Yes, they work. And so the disconnect, you
Yes.
wonder why, the people who have the most stress and encounter the most trauma in their life, why do they not have these tools and skills? They were never taught these tools
Yep.
and skills. It's outside of their skill set. And so that's what I feel like. I and my team were disruptors. We're coming into these professions that was traditionally just suck it up, buttercup. I mean,
Yep.
there was no context for how do I protect and heal my mental and emotional health. And so that's what we're bringing. We're flipping the script on that as well. Like, you better start feeling your feelings. And I'm sorry you didn't learn this, in the police academy or wherever you had your professional training, but we're bringing it to you now because you need to learn that you have the ability to settle and calm your own nervous system. And these are smart people that we're talking to. Once we explain it to them and demonstrate it for them, they get it intellectually. But then the next step is doing it. You have to embody it. You have to learn how to do it, and then you have to do it, and that takes some time and some practice. But yeah, that's basically exactly what you said is what we're trying to explain to people, is that you have the power to regulate your own nervous system, to calm and quiet your biology, to balance your body chemistry and all that. And I focus on meditation and mindfulness. Those are the tools and skills that I love. We have another trainer that focuses on yoga. All of us teach breathing exercises, but it's like a whole person thing. We're not just teaching meditation and mindfulness. First, we're making them aware of how stressed and traumatized they are, because, they're like a fish in water. Like, it's just so normal to them. They've had this career that's just full of stress and trauma, and so they're in survival mode. They don't even know they're in survival mode. So first we have to educate them about that, and then they go, oh yeah, I do feel like that. And we go, well, here are some tools. Like, we don't want to just be the bearer of bad news that you're marinating in stress hormones all the time, but here are some tools, and with mindfulness just being one of the tools.
Well, and I love that message, because first of all, a lot of people we're taught to feel disempowered by our emotions, when it's actually the opposite. They empower us when we can take responsibility and accountability for what happens within our bodies. We're empowered, because then we can do something about it.
That's right.
Everything out there, or if it's somebody else's fault, we can't do anything about that. So it's just a part of the job that's out there. That's sweeping it under the rug.
Yeah.
Not healthy.
That's it. But they don't know what they don't know. And no one ever gave them any coping mechanisms or any tools. And so the best way to survive it is to learn how to stuff the pain and stuff the trauma and stuff the stress and compartmentalize it. And that works for a while. Like, you can do that for about 5 years or so. And then they start to get the inevitable burnout and all the symptoms from carrying around that much stress and trauma. And so, what we're trying to teach and help people understand is that you cannot control the external environment. You can't control the emergency. You can't control the person, the people. You can't control the disaster. You can't control any of that. But you can learn to manage your own internal landscape. And that's empowering when you learn about self-regulation. Yep. And that you can develop skills and tools and develop the ability. And like, maybe not when it hits the fan, maybe not when you're right in the middle of it. When you're in the middle of it, you go into warrior mode, you are in survival mode, and you do the things. But you can train yourself in that once you're out of the emergency, or once you're out of the crisis, your brain and body will want to keep you in it, because the brain chemicals that have been released and the body chemistry that's elevated, but that you can develop skills and tools to start to bring that down. And by simply coaching yourself, I'm not in the crisis anymore. I'm not in the heat of it anymore. I'm safe. And that's part of why we like teaching meditation and mindfulness. You're absolutely right. The external, and if you wait for the external environment to allow you to be calm and peaceful, then good luck.
Yeah, I know. Well, it goes so much further than first responders. It's like, we have to understand that if first responders learn this technique and have this technique within them, they can help abuse victims better. They can help talk about another ripple effect. Once we can get there, it helps other people get there.
We're seeing this with police officers, paramedics, social workers, other mental health professionals. That these are all professions that encounter, it's called vicarious trauma. Vicarious trauma is prolonged long-term exposure to the trauma of others. And we're finding this across all these professions, that when people learn that self-regulation piece, and they start to apply the tools, the breathing, and getting themselves under control. I don't like to use that word control with this demographic because
Yeah.
it means something different than what I mean. I mean, like manage or
Yeah.
regulate. You're absolutely right. It positively impacts the situation, the scene, the interaction with coworkers, the interaction with whoever their clients are, whether it's a citizen or whatever. Yeah, you're right.
So how has this turning your mess into this message helped you in your life?
I think it definitely helped me heal the grief. And there's a lot of other emotions that come along with grief that I definitely could see I might have gotten stuck in. There's anger and sadness and victimization and just all the things. So that definitely helped me heal all of that. Of course, this is in hindsight, as I look back. When I was stepping into this realm, I didn't consciously go, oh, let me turn this mess into a message and see if I can help other people. It was just, I can't sit back and not do anything now, knowing what I know, and knowing how badly it can end. So it definitely helped me heal my grief. It allowed me to channel that energy into something positive for other people. And now, flash forward, it's helped me create this entire business that I would have never even imagined, that is employing the very people that I want to help. So I'm encountering people who are either close to retirement or retired, and they're all people who have done their own work. So they've worked on their own wellness, they've built up some resilience, and they've done some teaching in their own professions. But now this gives them a way to step out of the profession, law enforcement or corrections or whatever it was, and to reach their hand back, and teach the people who are still in the professions. And that's super rewarding for me. That makes me feel really, really, really good. So it helped me heal. It helped me create a business that's really beneficial to a lot of people. And I never wanted to be like a poster child or a spokesperson for suicide. I didn't want to get stuck there or trapped there because it's really hard for me to talk about. I feel like it's way above my pay grade to really talk about it much, other than my own personal experience. So instead of that being my track, which I'm not saying that's a bad track, that's a perfect track for some people, but that wasn't going to be a track that worked for me. So instead of just kind of being in that suicide prevention or suicide education world, I get to be in the more preventative.
Yes.
So education and information. So it's more preventative, and that's a good fit for me. So now here we are, all these years, flash forward, and I feel like I probably feel better about the entire situation, because when I feel down or low or sad or I miss my husband, wish things could have been differently, then I can pivot and say, well, at least I'm doing this. At least I'm doing this. And I couldn't help him, and I can't change that, but maybe I can help some other people. So it's definitely a win-win for me.
Yeah.
It's a win for me, for sure.
Well, and I so relate to that because I had the same kind of experience with my trauma. Is people would ask me to write a book on narcissism, or and that's not where my focus is. There's people who do it wonderfully,
Yeah.
and but beyond my experience, that's it's the same thing. It's like that's just a part of it actually helped me to find myself. That's what I want to focus on.
Yeah.
Like
So yes,
how
yeah, I get that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's the same, those same thoughts, and I love that everybody could have different paths through these things, and we need them all.
Yeah. Yes,
It's
yes,
such a
yes, yes.
blessing.
Yeah. I mean, not everybody has to go out and write a book or create a business around, but if you are suffering, if you have pain or grief or those heavy emotions created by life experiences. I mean, we all do. It's not for everybody, but finding a way to work with other people or help someone else or volunteer or educate or inform or just give your skills, your abilities, your energy. You know, this sounds so big, but I'm just going to say, like, to make the world a better place and to make someone's, even one other person's life a little better, it can be so healing,
Yes.
you know, to the individual. And it prevents you from wallowing in it and staying stuck in it and staying, you know, being labeled or identified by that pain, by that hurt, by that mistake, by that loss, by whatever it is. Yeah. And, you know, and you get to pick how you want to focus on it. I mean, you know, we do need people to write books on narcissism. We all
Yeah,
need to learn, you
exactly.
know, a lot of us have been impacted negatively by narcissists and we didn't know, right? Fish in water, we're just in it. And we didn't know, or some of us have had narcissistic tendencies and, you know, and we didn't know. So we do need people to write it, but you don't, just because you've been impacted by it in your life or experienced it doesn't mean that you have to. If you want to step away from narcissism, the topic, and go work on healing, teaching people, but whatever it is, I mean, that's the whole thing. And I'm glad that I was strong enough right up front to realize I don't, because a lot of people approached me about talking to survivor groups and a lot focused on suicide. And I identified really early on, I don't want to do that. I need to leave that to people who are, you know, have the power, the strength to do that.
Yeah, because it's like an inner calling. You had that inner calling to do this work. I had the inner calling to do the work I do. And we all get these different inner callings, and people are called to do these things. And I love that when we just allow ourselves to be where we feel called, it it, it is the power of turning the mess into the mess.
Man, it really is. And, you know, so a lot of people get frustrated because they don't know what their calling is. They don't know what their purpose is. And I understand that. I don't know that everybody has like one specific calling or one specific purpose. Before I did this work, I was teaching meditation and mindfulness in corporate settings. And I felt like that was my calling. You know, I felt like that. And it was for a while, for a time it was, because I was bringing this kind of new age, new edgy, you know, new concept, but I was bringing like the science and the research behind it into these stressful environments. And that felt like a calling. And then my calling changed, my purpose changed. But underlying this entire conversation about a calling and purpose, if I can just give it a plug, meditation and mindfulness and learning about those skills and tools and learning to sit with the self and listen and you know, it can help you uncover what your purpose is or what your callings are, you know, what you feel really aligned to do in this world. Turning off the noise and learning to sit in silence with self. To me, that's the best way to figure out what those inner callings are.
Oh, and so with that, we're going to wrap up the initial segment. And if you are not watching on YouTube and want to see us go deeper into this topic beyond the seed, tune into YouTube, because I'm already getting chills just knowing about this
I love it.
conversation. So thank you so much, Kim, for being with us for this segment. And like I said, if you're not listening on YouTube, please go there, because I know this is going to be a very
Come on over there.
helpful.
Come on over there. I can tell this conversation is going to be good.
All right. Okay. So let's dive into that, because I think that is so important, what you said about the meditation and mindfulness really helping us hear that inner calling, because it is so true. Because sometimes in that world of doing, we're going too fast to hear anything, see signs, all of that. They all just like pass us by because we can't slow down to just be and listen.
Yeah, we live these very noisy, busy lives. It's what we've all been trained into. And then I work with a demographic that, on top of living the loud, busy life, they see and hear and smell and endure things that most of us will never encounter in our lives. And so they carry those memories and images and heaviness and sadness and other people's trauma and that. And so they sometimes work to keep their lives busy and loud because they can't stand to be in the silence because of what arises. So it's really difficult sometimes to encourage this demographic to go ahead and sit with it, because what you're afraid will come up is the very stuff that you need to deal with,
Yes.
sit with, work through. And if you can't do it on your own, that's okay. Most of us can't. If you can't do it on your own, then that is your sign. See, sitting and being still and being quiet, and then identifying, I can't do this, then that is your inner calling to talk to a friend, talk to a peer, go to a peer support meeting, find that counselor or therapist for the first time, go talk to your chaplain, whatever that might be. So that's a great example of how this is kind of misinterpreted sometimes. Sit still, turn everything off and sit still and just breathe and just be. How does that feel? And if it feels bad, then you need to dig a little bit deeper. Why does it feel bad? Because my goodness, every single one of us should be able to sit still with and by ourselves and just breathe and be. And if we can't, there's something going on in the inner landscape that's trying to prevent us from doing that. What is that? And you don't have to live with that and hold it in. There are things you can do to help you process that.
Well, and what people don't realize is when we hold it in to our bodies, it's in our bodies. It's creating disease in our bodies. It's creating muscles to not work right, the blood to not flow right, to do, you know what I mean? Because it's all energy that creates us to flow, and we create blockages when we try to shove stuff down.
That's it. I think people don't understand, or they don't really believe in the mind-body connection. They think
Yeah.
it's like a new agey, rhetoric or psychobabble, but it's mental health is health.
Yes.
Mental health is health. Emotional health is health. Physical health, you can't separate them. It's
No.
intertwined, mental, emotional, physical. And this is what I tell my audiences. If you aren't actively working to quiet and settle the nervous system, to bring your stress level down, to cool off, to calm down, to deal with those emotions, if you aren't actively working to do that, then you are going through a 30-year career sort of marinating in stress hormones. And it doesn't have to be that way. And go Google stress hormones. They are not beneficial to your overall health in big doses for a prolonged amount of time. They are going to cause illness or dis-ease in your body. There's no way around it. I love that saying.
Yeah.
Deal with your wellness, or you'll be forced to deal with your illness.
Oh, I love that.
I love that
That
saying
is a
because,
great
yeah,
saying.
for people who are afraid of wellness, like, I'm so sick of the word
Mhm.
wellness. I mean, call it what you want to call it. You don't have to call it wellness, but you better get at least somewhat focused on it.
Well, and I love, the what is it? Carl Jung said, I think it was what what wait, what we focus on. No, I can't even remember the quote, but it's about what persists. What we focus on persists. So if we say we don't like something, we've put our energy into what we don't like, then
Yes. What we resist
yes,
persists.
so that's the quote. It was
Yes.
not coming to
Yes.
me in that moment.
Yes. And what we think about, we bring about.
Yeah. And
And
that's the thing is, and people don't get that if you're putting your negative energy towards something, oh, wellness, it will keep coming up.
indeed, indeed.
So
Yeah, indeed. So I always think about, so when I have a conversation like this with someone and it kind of starts to go deep, and we talk about, our ability to kind of control our own reality is what we're talking about, basically. By nothing changes until we change. And you and I can talk about this in a different way than maybe somebody who works long shifts on a fire truck and sees terrible things. They work fatality car accidents and all these things that some of us will never see in our lifetime. And then you introduce a concept like this to them, what you resist persists. And then they would say, well, if you could see the images in my head, you'd see why I try to resist thinking about any of this, feeling it, I don't want those pictures and images, so you would understand. And do you see what I'm
Oh,
getting at
yeah.
here? For people who are combat veterans, for people who, are dispatchers or social workers, and just hear and deal with really, really heavy, devastating other people's trauma. Yes, this is probably more difficult. I mean, I'll give you that. Difficult, but not impossible. And the effort is so worth it. The efforts are worth the rewards. And so I don't give up in these conversations. I just don't give up. I just keep trying to come at them from a different level, or a different perspective. And until I can get like, does this make sense to you? So you and I can probably talk about it in a more esoteric way, but I'll use like sports analogies or whatever I have to do to break through, right? Because I want these people so much to not continue to marinate in stress hormones and think it's inevitable that they're just going to be sick and broken down by the time they're 50. It's not inevitable.
Well, and what I feel like some people don't understand about it. So I have PTSD. So when my nervous system's activated like that, and the levels are in that crisis mode, it's easier for me to put myself in more toxic situations because I'm in survival mode. So when I can, and what I didn't know is by just claiming my feelings about something, like looking at the feelings, watching them come up, claiming them, they went through me so much faster that I didn't have to hold on to them. It was the shoving down that created more damage.
Yeah.
Than just allowing them to come out, hurt for a minute and be out. And then that way they're not operating in a passive aggressive way towards my loved ones because they will surface. They can only get squished down so much before they're aimed at somebody else.
Yes. And that's
And
huge.
usually an innocent bystander.
Yeah. Always.
Yeah.
Always. And in these professions that I work with, you have to act a certain way when you're dealing with your clients who are your citizens of your community, right? You have to act in a certain, like you have some rules and regulations. So where can we take out our worst of our worst? At home, with the people closest to us, with the people who love us, with the people we spend the most time with. We can't do it at work. Everyone's filming everything. Everyone's got a bit, and not that it doesn't happen. Obviously it happens. And so we go home with our people, we can let our guard down. And that's where we have all the bad behavior that is coming out because we're so full of pain. That what you just said is just such a good point. Holding it in and shoving it down and not allowing yourself to feel it. Now, I'm not going to say to anyone who has no experience with wellness or resilience training or therapy or like any of this, I'm not going to be like, go sit down and just start letting all those emotions come, because you can be flooded. It's a process. And that's why I say you may need to talk to a friend, go to a peer support meeting, find some kind of a peer support chaplain, or be brave and make that first therapy appointment so you can start to I have this slide that I use in a lot of my presentations, and it's just this massive mountain of garbage. And I talk about how that kind of a mountain of garbage builds up inside of us when we don't sift through the emotions, the feelings, the memories, the pain, sift through it, process some of it, and throw some of it out. Just get rid of some of it. Yeah. But none of that happens in avoidance, by avoiding it. No good, and you can probably attest to this, no good will come from holding that stuff in. You're not going to get healthier,
And I love in your book where you're having the stories of the first responders, where they were talking about, each one talks about what helped them, and community was such a big part of that.
Yeah.
Not feel alone. And I think that is so under talked about, is we really aren't alone. There's other first responders. And it's about finding your people that it can come out with.
It is about finding your people, but it's also about being a pioneer in these professions and setting the stigma aside and making it okay to talk about things, because that's why They formed some communities. Firefighters are probably the best example of that because they're in the fire station together, and they do 24-hour shifts or long shifts together. They sleep together, or they eat together. They have a kitchen, and a lot of times they sit around the kitchen. So that's kind of a family environment in that community. But it's never really been okay for them to talk about what actually happens or what they, so they go on a really difficult call. Mm-hmm. And then they come back and they may have coffee and make a meal and have, but the only way that traditionally they've been able to talk about some of the things that they saw and, what they did on that call would be to joke about it, because Black humor, it's called dark humor or Black humor, and it's prevalent across all these professions because it was the only acceptable outlet for them. You couldn't have any real conversations. And that's slowly starting to change with the development of peer support groups. And, there are all kinds of mechanisms that are in place now that weren't even around 5 years ago. But the community piece, it's really, really important, but you have to have a community. Like a lot of people say, well, I've got my buddies or my friends, but then the community event is drinking. But do you know what I mean? So there's these things, but that's not the level of community that helped some of the people in my book. It was finding, for them, it was finding like-minded people who understood them, who were also on a healing path, right? Like that. That's what made that difference for them. And, they could have found 6 buddies to go bowling with and drink themselves blind. That's community too, and not that, it's not okay to get together and have some beers with your friends, but it is in the healing world or building resilience is you kind of got to look for your crew or your group or your community that's kind of on the same path. And if you don't have that, you can create it, you can build it. Yeah.
Well, there's a saying that I love that says, don't go to the hardware store for bread. And, and I love that because it reminds me in a non-judgmental way is know where people's strengths are. I have friends that I can talk to on this level that I can go deep. I have friends that will make me laugh. I have friends that I can talk to on a surface level as a distraction. There's people I wouldn't go to for certain things because that's not where I need to go. I know where I go. I know which store I go to when. And it's not saying that none of the stores are bad. It's just knowing.
Yeah.
Not having an expectation of somebody to be there that can't be.
Absolutely. And that happens.
That really helps.
That happens a lot. You're looking for love in all the wrong places kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I think the idea or the encouragement to develop a community or find a community is find a community that's doing what you want to be doing, or, that's headed where you want to be headed. And the core message, I think, is don't isolate. Yes. We are pack animals, human beings, we're pack animals. And so sometimes you feel like you want to retreat and pull away from everybody and nobody really understands you, or you feel like you're a drain on people, whatever the reasons are that you want to isolate. And it's okay to isolate once in a while if you need to be by yourself. But if that's becoming a way of life, you're not going to heal in that vacuum. It's the community that will help you heal. You just have to find the right community, just like you said.
And one of the things I love that the positives that came out of COVID is the community doesn't have to be local.
That's right.
You can talk to people across the world on Zooms. I have so many close friends that I have these kind of conversations with, not recorded, these kind of conversations with, because these are my people and this is what feeds my soul. But I might not have the local people around that can talk in the certain ways that that do that for me. So
yeah, good point.
I mean, so people in rural areas, as long as you have internet, you're okay. You can find your people. And one of the things, I don't know if this happened with you, but it definitely happens with me. When I get my mindset that I'm going to be moving in a certain direction, people show up, books show up, support shows up, but as long as my mindset is there,
Yeah, there is
it
something
just starts
that
showing up.
absolutely starts magnetizing the things you need to you. Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. Um, Changing that mindset's really, really difficult. And of course, I encounter a lot of people who are not in a good place mentally or emotionally, right? They've done these hard
Mhm.
jobs for a very long time. No one ever told them they needed to be taking care of their mental health, no one told them. And so it sneaks up on you. And then, they're just not in a very good place. So changing, it's just so many layers to it, but encouraging people to start to change that mindset. And what comes along with that, as you know, is sometimes you got to change your habits in the places you go and the people you hang out with. And I mean, if you're someone who wants to start having more positive experiences, you got to look around at who you're hanging out with. I've said this to people over many, many years, talking about um, changing habits and changing your own life. And I'm like, if you're broke all the time and you want to make more money and you want to increase your income, increase your finances, then you got to quit hanging out with people who are broke and all they talk about is that they're broke. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that's just kind of a funny example of, yeah, if you want to change your mindset, if you want to improve your mental health and you want to focus on wellness, you want to feel better, then you can't hang around the Debbie Downers who are negative and complain and just, exist or marinate in that stress and complaining and all that negative stuff. Yeah, that's community and finding the right community or creating your right community. And yeah, it doesn't have to be your normal friend group. It doesn't have to be like,
Nope.
well, I only have 6 friends and they're all like that. Well, you know, get online, go find new friends, go someplace new, go, do some new things.
Well, and it was fascinating in your book too to learn about the retreats, the different retreats that are out there to help first responders, the
Yeah,
weekend retreats and
one
stuff.
of my
That was
biggest
fascinating.
regrets after my husband died, one of my biggest regrets was that I didn't know about any of these. And we really looked for, uh, the right treatment for him when he was, when he was not doing well. And I think the main reason that I didn't find any of these first responder or veteran specific programs, one, I wasn't looking in the right place, but two, there weren't as many of them then as there are now. My husband died in 2014, and with 5 years after that, this industry of warrior wellness, helping first responders, had exploded. But yeah, there are. So that's the thing with this audience, is that they are not comfortable typically going into a normal therapy group that the rest of us might go into. Most of us might love going to group therapy and talking about with like-minded people, or a retreat weekend or something, because of the work they've done. They're just not going to be as comfortable sitting in some of these groups. But if you can take them out of their life and send them to a retreat with peers, people who understand the weight they carry, who know the work they've done. It's on a different level from the rest of us. It just is. What they've endured is just on a different level. Then they feel more comfortable letting their guard down. And yeah, I love some of these retreat programs. So I work with the Battle Within here in the greater Kansas City area where I live. And we work with first responders and veterans. It's 5 days in nature with your peers, get you, out of your life. And that organization, they're not there to heal you or fix you or just like take you on a fishing weekend. They're there to teach you skills and tools that you can use to get on your own healing path and heal yourself. Because ultimately, that's the only way it works, right?
Yeah.
Nobody can fix us, and nothing in our life will change until we change.
It's such powerful work you're doing. And I'm so, as devastated as I am for you that you had to experience what you did to get you here. I'm so grateful that this was your calling to turn that mess into this message, because I I don't, for me, I look at the PTSD aspect a lot, and I can see it in first responders. Just because, like,
Yeah.
like recognizes like. So I know what happens in my body when I go into that. So imagining what they experience, just even in trying to imagine, and
Yeah.
it just
With
this
no
needed to
tools to
happen.
deal with it.
Yeah. And I do like that neuroscience is finally really exploding now with new pathways that make it easier, the self-soothing of the nervous system so much easier for people. Because I mean, mindfulness, the science behind mindfulness is like really coming forward more and more
It is.
as
We
of
really can't argue with
neuroscience.
the science anymore.
No.
And something as simple as breathing, this is our favorite tool to offer to people in our trainings, is just teaching them about breathing and then giving them 2 or 3 different ways to experiment with breathing, find something that works for them. But providing the neuroscience and the science behind how breathing can help you cool off your own stress response. Because again, like I told you earlier, these are smart people. They couldn't do
Yeah.
the job they do if they weren't, they're smart people. They get it intellectually. We get them in our classrooms and we have them do it, and then they feel it, right? You can't argue with that. And a lot of people will raise their hand in these trainings or come up to us on a break and say, I'm wearing my Apple Watch, and when I got here, my heart rate was this, and now it's stayed around here. Or, they'll give us, real-time data proof that what we just did in this 1-hour class has helped calm their inner landscape, slowed down the heart rate, which brings down the blood pressure. So yes, to everything that you just said, it's super empowering. Mindfulness, meditation, breathing being some of the, the simplest practices to start with. But we can't argue with the science anymore. There's been 25 years at least of pretty solid research, and it's just, the momentum is growing, even with something as simple as breathing, something we do every day. All we have to do is do it on purpose in a certain way.
Yeah. And it really does help when we can do that pause, and because it
Yeah.
really does help us move into response instead of reaction.
Yes, that's
And
the most powerful takeaway from this whole entire conversation, and everything, that the reason I wrote the book and everything else that I'm doing is personal empowerment. And that's what it boils down to. Personal empowerment. Knowing that you are not a victim to the stress, to the trauma, to your feelings, that there are choices you can make and things you can do to get back in the driver's seat of yourself. So empowering.
yes. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for this whole conversation. This has been a complete joy. Thank you for taking the extra time. And I mean, I know after reading your book, the first thing I did was set my alarm this morning to meditate. So I'm
Oh,
like, okay.
yay!
I'm like, I need to get back into the routine of meditation. And it was just like,
Yay!
and then that just 15 minutes, I can give myself 15 minutes to meditate, and
Um,
doing that work again, and remembering how good it works. But sometimes we try out all these other things and then forget, oh wait, I need to go back to basics.
yeah. Listen, okay, I think meditation needs to be like a daily, like brushing your teeth. I really do. For all 8 billion of us, it's and there's a million different ways to approach it and to learn about it. But I think it needs to be foundational for all of us. So go find a technique that works for you, everybody, and give it a shot.
Yeah, it's because it does.
Yeah.
It's that release, and we need that space, and that's our space, and that's our space to claim.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. This has been a fun conversation.
Thank you for coming. And whoever's listening to this, know that if you're here, it's because you're meant to be here.
Agree. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you. Make sure to follow the links that accompany this episode. You will learn a lot more about today's guest and see what they have going on now. You will also get all the links to follow them on their journeys if this seed resonates with you. come back next week for another Seed of Wisdom. If you loved what you saw or listened to, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.